They knew where the ships were. Not roughly, not hours later. In real time. Every movement, every turn, every entry into the Strait of Hormuz. Before the US Navy even reached the narrowest point of the strait, Iran was already watching. Radar systems active, missile batteries armed, fast attack craft in position. On paper, this was a perfect trap. But here is the problem nobody talks about. Tracking the most powerful navy in the world is not the same as stopping it. And that is where everything begins to fall apart. The Strait of Hormuz is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. 21 miles. That is not a waterway. That is a corridor. And inside that corridor, nothing moves without being seen. Iran built its entire military strategy around this one reality. Not by matching US firepower, not by building a rival fleet, but by turning geography into a weapon. From the mountains above the coastline to hidden positions along the shore, a layered surveillance network watches every vessel that enters the strait. Radar systems scan the water continuously. Coastal units track patterns. Fast attack craft sit on standby, waiting for the right signal. And the single advantage holding all of it together is proximity. While a US carrier group travels thousands of miles to reach this zone, Iran is already there, watching, measuring, waiting. On paper, that creates a dangerous imbalance. Inside Hormuz, routes narrow, speed drops, maneuverability shrinks, which means the moment a carrier enters this space, it can be tracked continuously, accurately, and in theory, that should be enough. Enough to overwhelm, enough to isolate, enough to strike. But modern naval warfare does not work the way it used to, because knowing where something is does not mean you can stop it. If you want to understand why, subscribe to Naval Power Explained right now. This is exactly the kind of breakdown we cover every week. And this is the moment the entire Iranian strategy begins to crack. The US Navy does not rely on invisibility. It relies on layers. Layers of defense, layers of detection, layers built to operate under pressure, even here. Long before a missile gets close, it has already been seen, tracked, evaluated, and that changes everything. Because now the question is no longer whether Iran can watch the US Navy. The question is whether that information can actually be turned into action. And that is a much harder problem to solve. Stay with this, because what happens next changes the entire equation. The moment detection turns into action, everything speeds up. In modern naval warfare, time is measured in seconds, not minutes. And inside the Strait of Hormuz, that difference decides who survives. A missile does not need long to reach its target. Once launched, the window to respond is already closing. But this is exactly the environment the US Navy is built for. Not open oceans, not ideal conditions. Contested, high risk, watched from every direction. The carrier group does not operate as a single ship. It operates as a system. Destroyers move ahead and alongside the carrier, scanning continuously, building a real-time picture of everything in the environment. Every signal analyzed, every movement classified, nothing ignored. Because the goal is not just to see threats, it is to see them early. And timing changes everything. The earlier a missile is detected, the more options exist to stop it. Before it gets close, before it becomes dangerous. That is where the first layer activates. Long-range interception. Missiles designed not to hit ships, but to hit other missiles. Mid-flight, at speed. And if anything breaks through that layer, there is another waiting. Close-in defense systems. Automated, precise, reacting faster than any human ever could. But defense is only half of the equation, because staying in one place is exactly what the enemy expects. So the carrier group keeps moving, constantly adjusting, never static, never predictable, because even a tracked target becomes difficult to hit when it refuses to behave the way you expect. And above the water, the situation is already shifting. Aircraft launch, surveillance expands. The battlefield stretches far beyond the narrow limits of the strait, because the US Navy does not just respond to threats, it pushes them back. And that is when something critical begins to happen. Every radar site that stays active reveals its position. Every launch point that fires exposes its location. And once that happens, it becomes a target, which forces an impossible choice. Stay active and keep tracking, or go silent and lose visibility. Either way, the advantage begins to shift. And this is only the beginning of how it unravels. There is a moment in every high-pressure engagement where tension crosses a line. And when that happens, everything changes. Not gradually, instantly. Because escalation does not begin with a warning. It begins with a decision. A coordinated launch. Missiles from the coastline. Fast attack, craft pushing forward. Drones entering the airspace. All at once. This is Iran's core strategy. Not a single strike. Saturation. Too many threats. From too many directions. At the same time. On paper, this is where tracking becomes dangerous. Because now it is no longer about knowing where the US Navy is. It is about acting on that information. All at once. And for a brief moment, the advantage appears to shift. Multiple threats closing in. Distances shrinking. Time collapsing. This is exactly what the Strait of Hormuz was designed to create. A confined space. Limited maneuver options. Pressure from every direction. But saturation only works if the system holding it together does not break. And that is where the problem begins. Coordinating multiple attacks sounds powerful. Executing them, at the same time, with precision, is something else entirely. Every moving part has to align. Every launch has to be timed. Every system has to stay active. And the moment one part fails, the entire sequence begins to weaken. Meanwhile, the US Navy is not reacting blindly. It is managing the engagement. Threats are prioritized. Engagement zones are defined. Defensive layers activate in sequence. Not all at once. Exactly when needed. Because overwhelming a target only works if that target loses control. And this carrier group is not losing control. It is choosing what to intercept first, what to delay, what to eliminate completely. And while that is happening, Iran's own systems begin to work against it. Radar sites keep transmitting, revealing patterns. Launch positions stay active, exposing locations. Movement becomes predictable, and suddenly the tracking advantage Iran started with is now a liability. Because it is no longer just the US Navy being watched. It is Iran's entire network being mapped in real time. And once that happens, the pressure changes direction. At this point, the question changes completely. It is no longer about who can track or who can strike first. It becomes something much simpler. Who can stay in control? Because the Strait of Hormuz is not just a battlefield. It is a system, a narrow corridor where pressure builds fast, and control is tested constantly. Iran understands this. That is why its entire strategy is built around disruption. Make movement risky. Make entry uncertain. Make every decision feel dangerous. And in that sense, it works. Any force entering Hormuz has to slow down. Think differently. Operate with caution. But disruption is not the same as control. Because control is not measured by how much pressure you create. It is measured by what you can sustain. Hour after hour, day after day, without losing stability. Iran operates from proximity, close to the coastline, inside a familiar environment. But that advantage comes with hard limits. Limited reach, limited endurance, limited ability to operate beyond the strait itself. The US Navy operates differently. It does not rely on one position or one advantage. It operates across layers, across distances, across time. A carrier group does not just enter a zone. It connects that zone to a much larger system. Support from outside the immediate area. Surveillance extending far beyond the coastline. Coordination that is not confined to the strait at all, which means something critical. Even inside a corridor as narrow as Hormuz, the US Navy is not isolated. And that changes everything. Because control is not about who is closest. It is about who can maintain presence without being pushed out. And that requires more than tracking, more than missiles, more than pressure. It requires endurance, the ability to operate continuously without collapsing under the weight of the environment. Iran can make Hormuz dangerous, unpredictable, difficult, but sustaining control over time against a force built for extended operations is something else entirely. Because the longer the situation continues, the more the advantage shifts toward the side that can stay. Not just react, not just resist, remain. And that is the difference most people miss completely. In the end, the Strait of Hormuz reveals something most people misunderstand about modern warfare. It is not decided by who sees first, not by who tracks better, not by who creates the most pressure, because all of that only matters if it leads to control. Iran can track every movement across the strait, monitor every entry point, build a complete picture of everything happening in the water. And for a moment, that looks like dominance. But tracking is only the beginning, because information without the ability to act on it changes nothing, and acting on it requires more than positioning, more than timing, more than proximity. It requires the ability to sustain pressure against a system designed not to break. That is where the difference becomes clear. The U.S. Navy is not built around a single advantage. It is built around resilience, layered defense, continuous adaptation, the ability to operate under pressure without losing control. And inside a place like Hormuz, that matters more than anything else, because every advantage Iran holds is tied to the environment, the coastline, the narrow corridor, the confined space. But the U.S. Navy operates beyond that environment, across wider distances, across extended time frames, with systems that do not rely on a single point of control, which means one critical thing. Even when every movement is tracked, the outcome is not decided, because tracking does not equal control, and control is not given. It is maintained, over time, under pressure, without collapse. So while the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most dangerous waterways on Earth, and while every movement inside it can be watched, that alone is not enough. Because in modern naval warfare, knowing where something is only the first step. Stopping it is something else entirely. And that is the difference that decides everything. If this video gave you something the mainstream coverage is missing, you already know what to do.